Trips to Ayutthaya always fascinate me. When the city was destroyed by the Burmese in 1767, the Burmese king ordered his generals to completely destroy everything, a task which they did their very best to complete. Once the Burmese had finished destroying what they could, and the Siamese capital moved to Tonbori and then to Bangkok, the Thais themselves further dismantled the buildings in Ayutthaya and transported bricks from the old city with which to build the new capital. In order to raise money for the new buildings, concessions were sold to allow people to loot the old capital. On one visit to Ayutthaya, I saw signs of looting, but didn't realise that what I had seen was sanctioned by the government of the time. Nonetheless, despite enormous amounts of willful destruction and looting, so much still remains of the city. As you wander around the old ruined temples, it's almost possible to imagine what the city was like in its heyday. And if time travel was possible, and I could go back to any place at any time, Ayutthaya during its golden era would be very high on the list. But what was life really like in Ayutthaya? Unfortunately, there is very little detailed material available. Contemporary accounts do exist from both Thai and foreign sources, but they are in many different places and not always easy to find. Furthermore, the old Thai material is difficult to translate. However, the authors of the book I will review in this video have done all the hard work and have put together a very comprehensive study of Ayutthaya, which will appeal to academics as well as to anyone with a general interest in Thai history. If I do any more of these book reviews, and I certainly hope to, you will hear a lot more about these authors. The husband and wife team of Chris Baker and Pasuk Phongpaichit are my very favourite writing team. Chris Baker was a Cambridge University professor who taught Asian history. He has lived in Thailand a very long time. And his wife, Pasuk, teaches in the Faculty of Economics at Chulalongkorn University, one of Thailand's top universities. You can tell, obviously, that they are academics, therefore everything they write is researched thoroughly and peer-reviewed, but they write in a very readable and engaging style. I have several books written by one or the other or both, and can recommend everything they've written. I would happily pre-order one of their books before publication, and without knowing anything about it, purely on their reputation and track record. The prehistory doesn't interest me greatly. Many centuries ago, this region was very different. The sea level was 100 metres lower than today, and the islands just off the west coast of the peninsula didn't exist. It was just one large land mass. There were some native hunter-gatherers, and some still exist today. Several years ago, I copy-edited a thesis for a student who was studying the Sagai tribe in southern Thailand, a race of dark-skinned pygmies with curly hair. She had actually stayed with them in the forest to research their way of life. The interior was thick jungle with many dangerous animals and disease-carrying insects. The population was very small. The national borders we know today are only recent inventions, and instead of nation-states they were just centres of power, such as Chiang Mai, or Lana as it was called then, the land of a million rice fields, Sukhothai, Pitsanulok, Lopburi, Nakhon Si Thammarat, etc. The strength of these centres ebbed and flowed, mainly as a result of war, and for a couple of centuries, between 1400 and 1600, there was constant war. The book describes this period in great detail. Around 1600, Europeans started to arrive. The Portuguese first, followed by the Dutch, British and others. Siam was already doing lots of trade with China, Japan, India, Persia and other places, and Ayutthaya turned into a major entrepot. It was a very cosmopolitan city, with separate enclaves containing traders of different nationalities, and, of course, many languages were spoken. The Europeans weren't particularly interested in taking any Siamese goods back to Europe, but they would buy certain goods to sell in other Asian countries. For example, they would buy deer hides in Siam to sell in Japan. Written Thai history tends to revolve around the royal chronicles, and these accounts ignore everyday life for normal people. One of the nice things about this book is that it gives insights into normal everyday life. Some Thais will try to tell you that prostitution only began in Thailand as a result of US troops being stationed in the country. This is complete nonsense. There's a long history of prostitution in Thailand, and according to the book, Ayutthaya had a thriving prostitution industry. One thing that quite shocked me, although I've read about it before, was the level of cruelty that was meted out during these times. I guess that most tourists visiting Thailand will think of the Thais as a gentle race, but they're actually a martial race and capable of great cruelty. The Burmese king slaughtered 7,000 Siamese, presumably to make food available to others, and there are several accounts of torture and execution for the smallest infractions. It was a brutal time in history. My favourite part of the book was the middle section, in which there was peace, prosperity and commerce. However, as with all great cities and empires, there always comes a time of decline and failure. By this time, the great Khmer Empire had already fallen, and the Siamese actually attacked Angkor in 1431 after an enormous shift of power. When Ayuthaya started to concentrate mainly on commerce, the old martial ways were forgotten, and after a long period of peace, there was a degree of apathy in relation to defence. Ayuthaya had become very wealthy. This wealth always impressed visiting Europeans, as did the beauty of the city and the great abundance of food and goods. However, the city's wealth also incentivised the Burmese to build a big army and mount another attack. The Burmese surrounded Ayutthaya for several months, cutting off supplies and eventually starved the inhabitants, including the stock of elephants. King Ekatad attempted to negotiate for peace in return for tributary status, whereby Ayutthaya would offer tribute to Burma, but the Burmese king had given instructions to completely destroy the city. Some starving Siamese went over to the other side, and the other Siamese centres of power did not offer any assistance to Ayutthaya. The Pitsanulok governor returned home while Ayutthaya was being sacked so that he could attend his mother's funeral. The official Thai history states that the eventual fall of Ayutthaya came after sustained aggression from the Burmese for many years. However, there had been peace for many years up until 1760, when a new Burmese dynasty once again sought conflict with its old neighbour. The final chapter of the book deals with the move to Bangkok via Tonbori. One of the military commanders when Ayutthaya fell was called Sin from Tak, and he became known as Thaksin. He managed to unite the surviving Siamese and established a settlement at Tonbori, the area of land on the opposite side of the river to modern-day Bangkok. However, he suffered from some delusions. Some Western missionaries at the time reported that he was convinced he wasn't human, and a coup was mounted. Thaksin was executed, and thus began the start of the Jakri dynasty that still rules Thailand today. I thought it was a fascinating book, and it's one that I'm very happy to recommend. But I'm a huge bookworm. I always have been, and nowadays not so many people read books. I use the internet, of course, because it is so quick and convenient for many things, but there is never the same depth of knowledge as there is in books. If anything, it's just too easy to publish things on the internet, and this has resulted in a huge number of people posting articles and videos online who have very little knowledge and not really anything to say. Give me a properly researched book written by authors such as these with huge credentials any day. In this short video, I've provided a brief summary of a book with 325 pages that no doubt took years to research and includes input from several people who probably have a combined knowledge of Thai history of hundreds of years. If you want the detail, I would strongly encourage you to buy the book. As ever, I hope you found this video useful. If you have any comments, questions or other feedback, please leave them below, and thank you for watching.